Good morning, everyone. Wonderful to be with you today, as it was last time. Before I lead us in a time of meditation, I would just like to say one word on behalf of voting. And if you have not voted yet, please do so. It's one of our most cherished rights. And if you haven't voted and are still going to, please do one more thing, and that is take your unity principles along with you when you vote. My message title today is The Power of Positive Prayer. An important realization in this is knowing that we have just one source for all the good that we want in life, the presence and power of God within us. In unity, we know that God is not a being with a long white beard sitting on a cloud somewhere. God is a very real presence and power within and all around us. So let's meditate this morning on knowing that truth and feeling how good it feels to know it. You might want to close your eyes if you're comfortable doing so. Then take a deep breath and let it go. Two affirmations that I've used many times are these. Would you please know them with me, silently? Here's the first. God in me is the one source of everything I want in life together. Excuse me. God is in me as the one source of everything I want in life, and then I have behind it together. So would you know that with me silently? The second is, no matter where my good seems to come from, I know it all comes from God and me. And once again, would you know that silently with me? You and I have an instant, constant, abundant source right within us, the source of everything we want in every part of our life. What a joy it is to know that. Let yourself feel the absolute joy of knowing that you don't have to search for a source outside you. You already have access to it instantly and constantly. God in you truly is the one source of all the good that you want, the one source for love, the one source for prospering ideas, the one source for guidance, the one source for healing. Feel your connection now to that one source beyond your conscious mind, yet very much a part of you, constantly guiding you, constantly loving you, always on your side, always having your highest good in mind. Feel it as a warm glow, a happy glow, right in your heart center. Knowing this truth, you feel safe. Knowing this truth, you feel secure. Knowing this truth, you feel a deep sense of peace. Now, take a few moments, if you would, to ask this inner source if there is a next step for you to take, a way to open more fully to all the good that you deserve. Open to hearing this guidance for a few moments in the silence. And now or however much you have been able to know and feel this truth, let yourself feel grateful to God in you. And remember that you can call this knowing and this feeling to mind all throughout the week. Thank you, thank you, thank you, God. Amen. One day, a woman went to her minister and said she needed some help. She said that she had a parakeet, a female, who all day long, every day, said over and over again, I'm a sexy swinger. I'm a sexy swinger. I'm a sexy swinger. She said she didn't know what to do. The minister said, well, I might be able to help. I have two male parakeets in my house, and they are both really pious. As a matter of fact, they spend the entire day, every day, in prayer. Maybe if you brought your parakeet to my house and put her in with my two, their piousness would rub off on her. She agreed to do that. She brought her female parakeet over to the minister's house. They put her into the cage with the two. And as soon as she got in, she said, I'm a sexy swinger. And one of the male parakeets said to the other one, our prayers have been answered. Since 1886, unity has been based on positive prayer. For many people, prayer is a form of begging, asking an old man with a long white beard on a throne in the sky for favors, with God saying to one, you know, I like you, so you can have what you want. And saying to another one, you know, something about you just fries my bacon, so no to your request. Well, as you know, in unity, that is not the God that we worship and believe in. For yet other people, prayer is a form of concentrated worry, asking for a solution while focusing on the problem. And as you just heard and said, in unity, our fourth basic principle says, positive prayer and meditation are tools we use to change our lives for the better. Unity began with the healing of our co-founder, Myrtle Fillmore. Many, perhaps most of you, know this story. Myrtle Fillmore had been brought up in a family where she was told her entire life that the family was predisposed to getting tuberculosis because they had weak lungs, and that she could expect to get tuberculosis and die from it. Well, here she was in 1886, being about 40 years old, having young children and a husband, and being told at that point that she might have, at most, 6 months to live. Charles and Myrtle were not about to simply accept the doctor's diagnosis or his sentence. They looked for other alternative means, one of which was attending a lecture by a man named Eugene Weeks. In his lecture, Mr. Weeks talked about positive prayer and said something that hit Myrtle like a thunderbolt when he said, you are a child of God. Therefore, you do not inherit sickness. Myrtle took it to heart. She began using positive prayer, and over the next 2 years was able to heal to the point where she was completely recovered. Then she lived another 40-some years in good health and died at the age of 86 one night in her sleep. After she was fully recovered after those 2 years, Myrtle began praying with other people. and they too were healed, including her husband Charles. Here's Charles' description of his healing in his own words. He said, "When I was a boy of 10, I was taken with what was first diagnosed as rheumatism, but developed into a very serious case of hip disease. He said, I was in bed for over a year, and from that time on, I was an invalid in constant pain for 25 years, until I began the application of the divine law and positive prayer. 2 very large tubercular abscesses developed at the head of the hip bone, which the doctors said would finally drain away my life. But I managed to get about on crutches with a 4-inch cork and steel extension on the right leg. The hip bone was out of the socket and stiff. The leg shriveled and ceased to grow. The whole right side of my body became involved. My right ear was deaf, and my right eye was weak. From hip to knee, the flesh was a glassy adhesion with but little sensation. When I began applying positive prayer Myrtle had used, there was, for a long time, slight response in the leg, but I felt better, and I found that I began to hear with my right ear. And gradually, I noticed I had more feeling in the leg. Then, as the years went by, the ossified joint began to get limber, and the shrunken flesh filled out until the right leg was almost equal to the other. Then I discarded the cork and steel extension and wore an ordinary shoe with a double heel about 1 inch in height. Now the leg is almost as large and almost as long as the other. Positive prayer is also called the use of affirmations, and it's a powerful tool. Some of you may remember in the 1990s, affirmations got kind of a bad rap, especially with Stuart Smalley on Saturday Night Live, saying, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me. But affirmations actually do produce tangible results. As we know in Unity, prayer isn't only something that comforts us. It also changes our life in positive ways. One question we ask in Unity is, how did Jesus pray? What was his relationship with God? Well, we know he used affirmative prayer. We know that he often gave thanks in advance. And we know that he knew God as spirit, not as a being on a cloud. Jesus said, seek, and you will find. Ask, and you will receive. Knock, and the door will be open to you. Sometimes I like to point out what Jesus didn't say. He didn't say, seek, and occasionally you'll find. He didn't say, ask, and sometimes you'll receive. And he didn't say, knock, and every once in a while, the door will be open. However, there is more than one way to ask. One way to ask is to ask as a tenant asking for an extension on his rent, or to ask as a beggar asking for a handout. When they ask, they're hoping to receive. Then there's the way a landlord asks for our rent, or the electric company asks us to pay our electric bill. They don't ask hoping, they ask expecting. Eric Butterworth, one of our beloved Unity ministers, said, we ask for water by turning on the tap. We ask for electricity by turning on the light switch. This, he said, is the right attitude to have toward God or Spirit, to ask expecting. We don't pray to change God's mind. We pray to change our consciousness. Mary Webb in 1900 said, "The well of providence is deep. It's the buckets we bring to it that are small." The truth is, God is constantly supplying us with all we need for a rich life. The secret is knowing that our good comes through us, not to us. This is why affirmations and denials are so important. Eric Butterworth tells a story in one of his books about a man who late one afternoon sat at his desk brooding. He had just been laid off, downsized by the corporation he had worked with for over 20 years. And he had thoughts like, how can they let me go after all this time? What am I going to do for income? How can I get another job at this point? How am I going to make ends meet? As he sat there, he noticed a spider on his desk and unconsciously just flicked it off the desk. And then he watched in a kind of amazement as the spider spun a silken thread from out of its body and put its weight on that thread and just gracefully swung down to the floor. The man thought to himself, well, wait, if this tiny creature can deal with the crisis that I just caused it in such a creative way by creating something from within itself, I can do the same thing. So he said, what if this is not a bad thing? What if there is something that wants to come through me and bless me in this situation? And he realized that he had long wanted to write, but had never had the time. Now he did, and so he wrote. Not that he became another Ernest Hemingway, but much of what he wrote, he sold. And with the proceeds from what he wrote and his retirement income, he actually had a standard of living higher than the one he had had before, and of course was having much more fun in the process. Eric Butterworth also said, the concept of denial is like seeing 2 + 2 = 5 on a chalkboard. The truth is, at least in base 10, 2 + 2 always equals 4. It's a law, a principle. But suppose you grew up believing that 2 + 2 = 5. As I grew up believing I'm guilty for being here, and as I grew up believing that life is a struggle. To change that belief, we'd have to first deny its truth. And I did that with the denial, I am not guilty for being here. And with the denial, life is not meant to be a struggle. Then I needed to affirm the truth. And I'm going to ask you to join me in knowing this affirmation with me out loud. Here it is. I am completely innocent. Together, I am completely innocent. I'm also going to ask you to know this affirmation, another one I've used. Life is a fun, easy, joyous adventure for me. Life is a fun, easy, joyous adventure for me. And it has become one for sure. Until about the year 1600, the belief we had on Earth was the sun rises and the sun sets. And we believed the Earth was the center of the universe. The appearance was that the sun rises and sets. However, the truth is that the Earth rotates, even though our body's eyes say otherwise. We've all had some 2 + 2 = 5s in our life. Some of us decided there's not enough. Some of us decided I'm not enough. Some of us decided men leave me. Others of us decided women want to control me. And still others decided, much like Myrtle Fillmore did, everyone in my family gets some kind of disease or other. Then, because of the law of mind action, that third unity principle we talked about a few minutes ago, which says my most deeply held beliefs are creating my experience. We can all prove we're right, no matter what beliefs we have. So what to do? For example, suppose you decided that you were a burden, as I did when I was a child. First, we would deny that with using a denial like, I now see that I was never a burden, but a blessing. And then we would follow that with an affirmation that, once again, I'm going to ask you to join me in saying out loud. The affirmation is this: everything gets better when I show up. Together? Everything gets better when I show up. And that is the truth for every single one of us. Denials aren't to be used to deny our experience. They're not to be used to say, I don't hurt when we do hurt, or to say, I don't feel angry or afraid when we do. Instead, we deny that pain, fear, or anger has any power over us. In the past, many people in unity thought denials were about denying our experience. There's an old joke that you may have heard. The joke is that one day a Catholic priest, a Jewish rabbi, and a unity minister all died. And then they all found themselves in hell. What a shock. They were all silent for a while, and finally the Catholic priest said, well, I might as well confess. I know why I'm here. I just couldn't resist eating meat on Fridays. This was back in the days when it was a sin to eat meat on Fridays. Another silence. And then finally the rabbi said, all right, I might as well confess too. I'm here because I just couldn't resist eating bacon. And that's why I know I'm here. Another silence. Finally, the priest said to the unity minister, well, out with it, man. Why are you here? The unity minister said, I'm not. This isn't hell, and I'm not hot. As some 12-step programs have said, this is called living in Egypt, also known as the land of denial, and it is not helpful at all. I know of a unity minister who had cancer for a year, and then at the end of that year died from the cancer. He was a minister of a congregation and he never told them that he was ill. They just got to watch him wither away week after week after week until the last few weeks he was giving his message from the front in a wheelchair. And then he died and was gone. Maybe you can imagine how betrayed those people felt. He was someone who using what I call old-time unity. His thought was, if I talk about cancer, I'll make it real. He had no idea how real he was making it by being afraid to talk about it. Contrast that with a friend of mine who, a few years ago, had been diagnosed with cancer as well. He told his congregation about it right away and took some time off for his healing journey. And before he went on his healing journey, and as he originally told his congregation, he said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to pray with me about this. But he said, one request that I have is, if you're going to worry, don't pray. And if you're going to pray, don't worry. The way to use denials is that even though the fact might be lack, pain, or illness, the truth is always, I am an expression of all that God is. Divine love, divine power of creation, divine wisdom, and divine life energy. There's a story that comes to us from the Great Depression about a man who had had a successful business, but went bankrupt, as did so many others in the Depression. For weeks after he went bankrupt, every day he would say things like, there has to be a way out of this. There is always a way out of something like this. I know there's a way out of this. Without even knowing it, he was using affirmative prayer. Then one day he saw an article in the newspaper about how there were millions of pounds of coffee sitting in warehouses in Brazil because there was no money to bring the coffee to the United States where there was a market. Then he recalled seeing another article sometime before that of millions of bushels of wheat sitting in silos in the United States because there was no market for it here. Well, using his business skills, he put these two together, had the wheat sent to Brazil in exchange for the coffee sent to the United States, and before long, he was once again a successful business person. The truth is, no matter the facts, we are always expressions of divinity, and we can call this divinity forth in full measure. This is what affirmative prayer is. So what 2 + 2 = 5 have you believed to be true in your life? Let this week be a time to deny that lack, struggle, and pain have any power over you or anyone on earth, and to affirm the divine truth for us all. Let's close with a denial and an affirmation. And once again, I'll ask you to know these with me out loud. Here's the denial. I am never limited by my past. Together, I am never limited by my past. And here's the affirmation. I now accept and embrace the truth of my divinity. Together, I now accept and embrace the truth of my divinity. Have a wonderful week practicing the power of positive prayer. Namaste.